we're now going to start our next session, which is going to be Ann Archer Butcher. It is my great pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Ann Archer Butcher. Ann has had 2 near-death experiences, many mystical adventures, and a life full of amazing spiritually transformative experiences. She has a master's degree in English and education and spent over 10 years as a high school teacher. She studied comparative world religions as a way to understand the remarkable things that she was experiencing in her own life, her own STEs. Along with her husband, Alden Butcher, she is the co-owner of Dolphin Media Services, and they provide full-service marketing for corporate projects, along with production, social media support, and editorial services. They've produced 2 top New York Times best-selling books for author campaigns. You can read about her dolphin rescue or her upcoming book release, 5 Blue Rings. So I would now turn it over to Ann Archer Butcher.
Thank you so much, Yvonne. I'm delighted to be here. I love and support Spiritual Awakenings International because it's a very important service to let people know that we really are spiritual beings, and having spiritual experience is a perfectly normal state of consciousness. And this particular story is one of my favorite. I have shared it all over the world. It is the miraculous dolphin rescue from shark attack, an amazing mystical experiences with dolphins in the Atlantic Ocean. And the experiences of my life began when I was just a little girl. I had many things that I experienced and explained to my mother, and she was very supportive and very loving about it all. But I eventually told her that I had needed to have a talk with God. It had become very clear to me. I was 3 years old, and I told her that I forgot something very important and that I was sure that God knew what it was and God would tell me. And I think many of us are in that sort of state in this lifetime. What did I come here for? What am I supposed to be experiencing? And what was I supposed to remember? Have I forgotten it, or was I supposed to rediscover it? But I had dreams of other lifetimes and told my mom about things that were going to happen. I have to give my mother a lot of credit because I lived in South Carolina and we were Southern Baptist. And the things that were coming out of my mouth were not at all acceptable in the Baptist church. But my mother was not only tolerant, she was encouraging of me. When I told her that I had things that were being told to me, other people might think that's voices. My mother said, that is God speaking to you, and you should listen very carefully. She said, life teaches us to forget, to not listen, but you should always remember that voice. And as I became an adult, many mystical things began to occur on a regular basis. Now, the story of the dolphin rescue occurred when I was in my 20s, and it is one of my favorite stories to share because I can still feel the joy that I experienced during that story. I was teaching high school in Indiana, and I began my classes by telling my students, we are all ancient beings here to fulfill our own purposes, our own mission. And of course, part of them probably thought that I was crazy, but some things happened. And after the dolphin rescue, my class became the most popular class because the students realized in the classroom, they were actually able to be quickened in the presence of everything that had happened. I was teaching high school English, literature, and philosophy. And coming from the background that I did, coming from the background of a Southern Baptist who really should be repressing a lot of the experiences according to the church, I really didn't know what I believed. And as my students asked again and again, what do you believe? I had to explain, I don't really know the answer. But my approach was to simply ask God for the answer. And I asked, dear God, and according to the faith that I was in, I turned to the Bible and said, teach me truth so that I may teach truth. Now, it was interesting because I felt guided to open the Bible randomly to various places. And it was very interesting, the things that the Bible was telling me, as if the Bible were speaking directly to me. And yet I felt truth all around me. And in fact, that request for truth became the catalyst for an entire series of beautiful, very balanced, very lovely, spiritually transformative experiences. But difficulties were also happening. I was in a relationship that did not last. I was stunned and shocked. I had no idea that this would happen to me. And I needed an opportunity to reflect, to get away. And it was time for Christmas vacation in my high school. So I headed to the beach where my mother lived, my favorite place in the world. I went to Hilton Head Island, South Carolina. It's a small island off the coast, and it's a blissful paradise with 12 miles of white, uninterrupted, stunning shoreline. And what I wanted to do was simply walk, contemplate, sit and read, and gather myself there by the ocean. Normally, at Christmas time, you can't go swimming. It's way too cold, but I had it in my mind that maybe. So on Christmas morning, my mother and I exchanged gifts, and then she suggested I go for a nice long walk on the beach. I needed the time to reflect, as I said, just to get away for a little bit. And I did go for a walk, but I wanted more. I wanted to understand more about my life spiritually and to have time to really reflect and connect with God. Now, people were not going in the water that day, but I considered again, oh, couldn't I just dive in and swim? But, I walked along the beach with others. They were picking up shells and enjoying the sunshine. But I wanted to go for a swim and wash away my concerns. Now, the truth is, I'm a strong swimmer, and I've always had a deep connection with the ocean. And I felt that it would renew my spirit if I could just go in the ocean. And so as I entered, I repeated that prayer on my lips. I said, dear God, teach me truth so that I may teach truth, so that I may know truth. And despite the hot day, the water was shockingly cold, and I went in anyway. I needed to just let myself swim and let the tension and the doubts and the fears just all fade away. And after swimming hard, I realized I had been pulled out by a riptide. The first thing I thought is, what are the rules? Oh, yes, I knew. Don't go out where the shrimp boats are. But I looked around and I didn't see any shrimp boats. Now, of course, sharks would go around the shrimp boat to get easy feeding, but there were no shrimp boats. But then I remembered, oh, wow, I know why there aren't any shrimp boats. It's because it's Christmas Day. And so nobody informed the sharks. And there I was swimming right where they would be, and they would be hungry. And then the shark appeared. And my heart just pounded almost out of my chest. I knew these waters were home to 3 of the world's most aggressive shark species. I had heard of shark attacks, but of course we knew the rules. You never go far out where the shrimp boats are. And yet here I was on Christmas Day, all by myself. My heart was pounding, and I was sure that I would die of a heart attack. And at that moment, it seemed far preferable than being eaten by a shark. And I could already see the headline. I could see for certain, daughter eaten on Christmas Day. That's the gift my mother would receive, because it's coming at me. I'm in the middle of the ocean. I wanted God just to lift me up from this horror, just pick me up, because there was nowhere to go. But suddenly I received clear and distinct inner guidance. And I felt a sense of calm come over me. I was told to lie down, face down in the ocean, and turn away from the shark. Don't look. But for a moment, I thought, but it'll just eat me like a long, lean French fry lying on the top of the ocean. And yet just lie down, turn away from the shark, stretch out long and lean. And I put my hands in front of me, and I did exactly that. I followed the guidance as I was given. But then I was hit hard from underneath, and it took my breath away. Of course, truly, I felt I might die any second. But rather than being pulled under, I was suddenly having a mystical experience. It was calm and peaceful, and felt completely surrendered. And somehow I believed that I was flying. Somehow I felt I was being lifted up and simply delivered from this nightmare. Truly, I might as well have been a bird, totally free and safe. I felt I hadn't to worry at all, but I didn't realize what was happening to me physically. But I was not being pulled under, which I was sure the shark would do any moment, but it didn't happen. Then I saw a dolphin flying in front of me, and another, and another. And of course, I realized why I was flying. I realized what was going on. And I had this moment, this realization that just permeated this amazing experience, that by turning away from the shark, I was turning away from fear. It's like turning away from negativity, turning away from doubt and all the things, even the most imminent, horrible thing that's happening, just turn away and trust God. And the next thing I knew, I realized dolphins were coming up from underneath me, and they were carrying me literally on their backs. Now, I saw that I was being rescued by an entire pod of dolphins, whole families of dolphins. And, you know, on Hilton Head, they're famous because the dolphins don't migrate. And I realized these dolphins, they know that I called out to God. They're responding. Now, they were twirling and dancing as if they were celebrating. We beat that shark. You know, you're going to live today. You'll live to tell this tale. And that was exactly how I felt. And when they had returned me to chest deep water, I expected that they would leave. I fully expected that the dolphins would just take off. But they didn't take off. They stayed. And I was just awestruck. But I felt again that when we choose love over fear, the events of our lives will change completely. And we can consciously raise our energy by choosing love. But even this was beginning to overwhelm me, because they didn't leave. They just whistled and clicked and sang. And they seemed to be giggling in delight. And that is how I felt. Now, but remember, I've been pulled out by a riptide. I have faced a shark. I've had this spiritually transformative experience of absolute peace and bliss and feeling like I'm flying. And then I discover I'm riding on the back of a dolphin. It's almost too much. I can hardly believe it's happening myself. But then what happened next really introduced even more mystery for me. Instead of leaving, the dolphins created a circle around me. And they did a ceremony where they each danced around, making a complete circle, almost impenetrable because there were so many of them. And I stood there in the middle, thanking them and thanking them and thanking them. And I thought that's what they wanted, that they were there for waiting for me to give them love in return and to give them my thanks and acknowledge them. But the level of sentient awareness was just staggering for me. And then what happened next is they took turns. They took turns touching my body. And One would touch my arm and move slowly past. Very slowly, another would touch the other arm. One would come up underneath my hand, then the next hand. And there was no part of me that they missed. The back of my neck, the top of my head, underneath my chin, as gentle as if I were dealing with a kitten. And yet each one of them took turns touching and touching my body. And I felt something inside. I felt that I was in the middle of a ceremony and that this was truly a magical event, a mystical, etheric expression. And I've heard great things about dolphins, we all have, but to me, this was beyond anything that I ever imagined. I didn't even know what was happening was possible. Every molecule in my body felt supercharged, not just with energy, but with love, with absolute peace and joy and happiness and unconditional love beyond anything I ever knew. I felt as if I were a mermaid standing there, and that this was my natural habitat, and these were my people, and they were caring for me and healing me and taking me beyond the trauma of the day. It was fully a spiritually transformative experience, and I knew I would never be the same. Now, I felt, of course, that they had supercharged every molecule in my body. And I told them, I found myself talking to them and them looking back at me as if they were listening and understanding exactly what I said. And I said, you're changing me. I know you are. And I'm grateful. I thank you. It's beautiful. And I am so appreciative. And it went on and on and on. I could hardly believe how long we stayed there together. By now, a whole group of people have seen what was going on, and they were gathering around the beach. It was quite a mystical moment for me. And when it was time for the dolphins to leave, I shouted out my love and thanks, and they danced and twirled in the air so beautifully, so magnificently. And even as I was watching them leave, I knew, because I taught literature and philosophy, I saw this from the perspective of a philosophical moment too, a spiritual moment. And what the shark represented in my life, I felt was fear, the doubt, the worry, and the desire to be lifted up was the sense of being cut off from God, that we feel alone, that we feel that we're floating in a void, and that we've come here and we feel lost. That was what the moment with the shark had been like. But when I chose to consciously cooperate with the divine and I sought guidance and I asked God to lift me up, both by asking for truth as I went into the water and then asking to be lifted up, that's when the doors opened wide. And to me, I've continued that practice to ask for guidance, to listen for God's guidance very carefully, to stay connected. You know, this entire weekend event for Spiritual Awakenings International is called The Dawn of Expanded Consciousness. And, you know, that title almost makes me cry because I feel that that is what's happening all over the world. That's what's happening for people in various states and in various ways. People are opening up their consciousness. They're beginning to recognize who they really are, that we are divine beings, that we are ancient beings, some perhaps more ancient than others, come here to fulfill our own purpose, to learn our lessons, to do all that we can do in our own evolutionary process, and to move forward with greater love, always choosing love. The events of our lives, if we choose carefully, will lead us from one state to the next with love. my husband and I say, even when somebody cuts in front of us, one or the other in the car, one of the other of us will remind the other to choose love. We can yell or we can choose love. Every moment is an opportunity to choose love. And yes, do we have to make discriminatory decisions? Yes, we do. And yet we can always find the best way to look at something. In our spiritual teaching and our path, one of the things that we learn about is dreams. And in dreams, I loved this concept that if you have a nightmare, and this dolphin rescue from a shark attack certainly started out as a nightmare, that one of the best things that you can do is interpret the nightmare from the most positive perspective you possibly can. Find the positive perspective. And that is how I've learned to live my life. Now, this day, things turned out so beautifully, obviously, with the dolphins here leaping in the air, dancing, twirling, that I couldn't interpret it any other way. This is an absolute blessing, a joy. But as the dolphins turned to leave, they didn't just take off like, okay, we're done. They did this tail fin dance as they were bidding me farewell. And it was just over the top, just amazing. And I watched them go backwards like that, away from me. And I felt, my God, there is so much more going on in the universe than we could imagine. If this event is happening, which it is, on Christmas Day, then this universe is more magical and more mystical and more amazing than I've ever given it credit for, nor most people to. And when they left, I knew I had to enter the world again and learn to somehow carry the depth of that magical experience with me. And the question really is, how do we do that? What happens next? And we can actually learn from others. That's why it's so important to have an event like this, where we hear the stories of other people. We've heard amazing stories. And even those who are researchers and they're telling the stories of others, I find myself uplifted again and again and again. When we learn who we really are as soul, when we discover that our true nature is love, when we realize that we are always guided and guarded and being protected, and that the ultimate end that we previously may have thought was the worst thing that could happen, death, is actually a celebration and a graduation. It should, in fact, change our perspective on life and help us to live it with more joy. There's something really cool about dolphins that people note that it looks like they are perpetually smiling. And that has become one of my spiritual practices. I try my best to perpetually smile. And if I have to do the dishes and there's a big mess, I look at the dishes and I smile like, oh, yay, the zen of doing dishes. And it's not that I am so super evolved that I see everything beautifully. I do it as a practice to find the beauty in life. It has become part of my spiritual practice. And so that day, as the dolphins left, I knew that I wanted to carry their smiles with me, to be upfront and close in person with wild dolphins who all appear to be smiling at you all at the same time. It's just staggeringly joyful. And that was one of my takeaways. But a greater connection with all life for me had been made, because that was one of the big questions that I had from an existential point of view. Teaching philosophy, I had come across this concept, and it was part of my responsibility to teach it, about the concept of an interconnectedness with all life. And this moment proved to me without a doubt that there is a greater connection with all life, and a connection with joy and the love. And certainly for me, that's what the dolphins represented. And just for a moment, I want to talk about this particular law of love. There are principles in the universe We've heard others talk about it here. Living by those principles, a principle-centered life is extremely important. But the law of love is the greatest law in the entire universe. And love is more powerful than power itself. Love is transforming, it's healing, it's uplifting. And that day I had turned from fear and opened my heart and my life to greater love and joy than I had ever known in this lifetime. But as I considered, how will I take this with me? I recognized that this principle, the law of love, is what I had to take with me, as if the volume on love had been turned way, way up. And I had to learn to live with that in balance and gratitude, and see if I could be a vehicle of that in the world. So, sometimes I actually think of myself as a dolphin. I'm surrounded by dolphins. My house is full of dolphins. And we have a 6-foot tall dolphin lamp. Dolphins are everywhere, but why this symbol of the dolphins is so important to me is that joy, that radiant joy, that brilliant leaping in the air, the singing of the dolphin song. It's an amazing thing. And to me, it represents the law of love. And, as I stepped out of the water, finally, I have to leave. I look and I see, oh my gosh, there's a whole crowd of people that have formed here. It was way before we all walked around with cell phones and taking pictures of everything, but I never stayed to see who had what, because as I stepped back onto the beach, all these people have gathered, and a woman comes running toward me and she said, "Oh, do you work with the dolphins?" And then a crush of people began to move around me. And I said, no, not at all, not at all. And I said, I got pulled out by a riptide and the dolphins rescued me. Now, what I was doing in my own mind was I was eliminating the shark. I wanted to pretend there was no shark. That was just a riptide. I was out too far. They brought me back. How nice. But I wasn't allowed to get away with that. An old man stepped forward. He knew what had happened. He'd seen the whole things. And he said, "Those dolphins saved your life." And I said, "Yes, I know." He said, "That shark was coming right for you." And I said, "Yes, I know. I'm trying not to remember." But he said, "You need to remember. You need to know they saved your life." And everybody is clapping, and I couldn't handle it. People wanted to talk, but I just needed to get on my bike and ride back to the house. So I said, thank you, everyone. And I practically ran to my bicycle, got on it, and rode as fast as I could back to my mother's house. There, I needed to go to bed and not to talk at all. I threw myself face down on the bed, and I did not want to even speak. Now, I think when we have spiritually transformative experiences, this is not an abnormal response. Sometimes we need to get away and just cloister ourselves for a while. We need a bit of a retreat. We need not to have to confront everything all at once, but an opportunity to integrate it into ourselves. And for me, I needed to absorb what I had learned. I needed to hold on to the love, simply feel it. I was actually shocked when I saw all those people on the beach. Somehow I thought the whole world in that moment existed between these dolphins and me, that was it. There was just us. And I wanted to remember what that was like. I wanted to remember that this was real. I wanted to remember that sense of love and joy and the blessing, and to hold on to the gratitude, the deep sense of gratitude. and not have these people make something of me that I was not. This was not something I orchestrated. It was not me working with the dolphins. This was the hand of the divine, and I was humbled and grateful. But I needed to acknowledge God and hold on to that gratitude deeply and recognize that something beautiful and mystical and powerful had happened. I wanted to remember every moment of what had just happened, and I wanted to understand it. And I wanted to see how on earth this was orchestrated. What had really happened here? You know, I've had the chance, as I said, to tell this story all over the world on multiple continents to thousands and thousands of people. And many people have ideas and they have their theories about what happened. But to keep it simple for me, because I had asked for truth, because I was deeply contemplating this inner connection between all life, how we affect everything and everything affects us, and that we are all connected molecularly, yes, but also deeply spiritually connected. And this was my answer. Why was it so dramatic? I have not a clue. Why did they stay and touch every piece of my body? And why did the dolphins seem to want to change me molecularly? I don't know, but it did happen. And I knew that I walked out of that ocean a different person. And I think that's how we feel when we've had spiritually transformative experiences, especially the major ones. It can be a major dream experience, can change you forever. Things can happen because who we really are super aware spiritual beings when we're in those lucid moments of knowingness. And for me, that's exactly what I had to acknowledge it as, is that this is part of my life's dharma. This is part of what's meant to be here, that I needed to be open. And I had to go back into my classroom, and I knew I had to tell my students, okay, this is going to be hard to imagine, but boy, something really cool happened. So that night after it occurred, I went back to the beach and I sent the dolphins more love and gratitude. We're doing that all the time. We're communicating all the time. But what are we sending out into the world? Chaotic messages of discord? Or are we sending peace and harmony and balance, discrimination, love, kindness? What are we sending out into the world? And I sat there and I sent out as much love, as much gratitude, as much acknowledgement as I possibly could. And I have maintained this connection with the dolphins, not just with dolphins all over the house, but a connection inwardly with the dolphins. And recently, this was probably a couple of years ago now, I was back on Hilton Head, and a girlfriend and her husband had come to visit, and she and I went to the ocean, and I am just nuts for the ocean. Some people were like, how could you even go back in the ocean after this occurred with the shark? And I'm like, yeah, because I don't even think about the shark. I think about the dolphins. So, for me, it's an ocean full of dolphins. For somebody else, it's an ocean full of sharks. And I think that really helps to allow us to look at what our attitude is. But my girlfriend said, okay, I'll go to the ocean with you. She was a tiny little thing. I brought 2 inflatable rafts, very nice, sturdy ones. And I wanted us to go out past the breakers so that we could just bob around gently and enjoy the ocean. But that meant we had to get over the breakers, and the water gets a little deep. She's a little shorter than me and she's smaller. And she was like, oh, I can't go out there. And I'm like, yeah, you have to. That's where the dolphins are. And she goes, I don't see any dolphins. I'm like, Hilton Head is covered in dolphins. And I said, there's dolphins out there. She says, okay, now I'm making that up. It's only occasionally you'll see a dolphin, here, there, and yon, but they're there and you do see them. And people actually come to the island because they want to see dolphins. So wasn't too far off the mark, I figured. So I get her struggling to go out into the ocean with me. Come on, Jane, just another foot. Come on, let's go. And finally, we get through the breakers. I get her on the float because she'd slipped off. She's on her float now. And she turns around and looks. She goes, look how far out we are. It's like, oh my God, you have no idea. and I said, Jane, it's okay. And I turned to the ocean, just like in this story, and I called out to the dolphins. And this time I literally said, hi, dolphins, we're ready now. And just, you could have counted 1, 2, 3, and straight in front of us, a dolphin, and then the next, and then the next. And Jane is going crazy because she thinks I call the dolphins. Well, I happen to know the dolphins live there. They do this on a regular basis. I just didn't think it was going to be right by our feet, but it was quite an amazing experience. And I believe that all the time we're sending out these messages to the universe of what we want and what we don't want. And what we don't want, because this is the lower worlds, will come back to us many times over than what we do want. So keeping our focus on the dolphins rather than the sharks is always the best bet. And sending out love and gratitude, you can't miss on that. So I was grateful because I'd learned a lot that day. The day of the dolphins is what I call it. I'd learned about love and trust and truth. And I believe that we are watched over, guided, and guarded in every moment. But again, we receive exactly what is right for us. And when I did this tour of the world and talked about the dolphin story, I was invited to University of Colorado in Boulder. And I did a presentation with students who all came to hear the dolphin story. And then we had maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours. They served us all pizza, so everybody stayed through lunch, and then the students asked questions. And there was this really handsome young man there, kind of looked like a football player, and his hand went up first. What you wouldn't normally expect, you know, the first volunteer, really fast, puts his hand up, and he reaches up and he wipes a tear out of his eye. And I said, please go ahead with your question. And he said, my family and I went out 2 years ago on the first vacation we'd had in a long time. And we went to the beach and we got pulled out by a riptide. And my mother was eaten by a shark. And he said, we never found her body, but we saw her being thrashed around with the shark. And I came here to ask, why was she killed and you lived? Gosh, I almost cry now thinking of it. And of course, everybody in the room teared up, and that young man cried right there in front of all of us. And I said, okay, this again is about love, trust, and truth. And the truth is, there is no death. Your mother did not die that day. And each of us has our own exit strategy, our own time that we will leave. Now, I had no idea if I was even remotely close to the mark of what that young man needed in his life. But he said, oh, thank God, that's what I wanted you to say. And I said that there is no death. And he said, do you really believe it? And I said, absolutely, unconditionally, there is no death. And I said, besides this dolphin experience, I have since had out-of-body experiences and 2 near-death experiences. I have stood in the light on the other side, and it is a bliss and a joy that is far beyond the story that I've just told. And that's where your mother went. And he stood up. Remember this early-looking football player of a kid, and gave me the biggest, longest hug. The entire group stands up and claps. So it's one question and a standing ovation. And that guy's heart was healed. But that is where the love and trust comes from, is knowing the truth of who we are and our connection with the divine. And that even when we leave this lifetime, that it is a great blessing. We are blessed. We are loved. We are beautiful, shining souls here for our own experiences, whatever that might be. And everybody talked about that young man's experience. They let him talk. They asked him questions. He talked about his insights. But for me, it was another wonderful spiritual experience, because we all receive what we need when we need it. And sometimes we have very trying experiences in our lives, and we can only hope to approach them with as much love and grace as we possibly can. My experience that day emphasized, as I explained to this young man, that there is a power in the universe working for our greatest good in every moment, even when it does not look that way to us, if we will ask for help with an open heart. Now, he acknowledged to the entire group that he had been asking God for his heart to be healed, because it was the first vacation his family had had in a long time. How was he going to deal with that? His younger siblings were there. There were 3 of them. And still, no matter what happens, if we remember to ask for help with an open heart, then we have moved into being co-workers with God, listening to God, allowing ourselves to be a vehicle for that guidance that we receive, for the love that we have available to us at all times. Still today, I marvel that the divine can pull together all the forces of the universe in a split second to change the entire course of events in our lives. And it can happen all the time, and it can happen for all of us in any moment. If we just stay open and aware, we learn things. They're not easy. This is the lower worlds. This is a university. This is not kindergarten. It's not necessarily going to be simple or easy. And yet the divine can pull together all the forces of the universe, and in a split second, change the entire course of events in our lives. To this day, I remain filled with gratitude that God's love, guidance, and protection is always with us. It's an amazing thing. You know, that young man that I told you about at the end, everybody had their issues. Some of them were just amazing that they came there for. But he said he was going to, he bought my book, and I gave him 2 more because he said he was going to share his book with his 2 siblings. And I said, please take these and give each of them 1, because he wanted them to read the dolphin story. He wanted them to understand and hopefully have their hearts healed too. So for me, the dolphins healed me that day. They changed me on a molecular level. They changed me, and we can be changed by that love, the force of God's love within us. When we contemplate or meditate or pray, can change us on a molecular level. It can heal us. It can take away the most serious diseases. It can make things that are incurable cured. It can make things that seem impossible happen to us. Those dolphins helped raise my vibration. I call it quickening. I actually learned that word from my high school students. I say it quickened me because it helped me to function at a higher vibrational level. And my life changed drastically. Now, I know if you've been to the Spiritual Awakenings International website, you'll see that there's an entire list of things that can happen to you as a result of a spiritually transformative experience, a phrase coined by Dr. Yvonne Keyson. And that is exactly what happened to me. I became a textbook perfect example of someone who has had their life changed by a near-death experience. Only this wasn't a near-death experience. This was a mystical, spiritual experience. This was just a life-changing event. But as Dr. Yvonne has said in her books, which I've read and love, there are many different spiritually charged events in our lives these spiritually transformative events can change us just as clearly as a near-death experience can. And remember, this is the dawn of expanded consciousness. We're all not going to have necessarily near-death experiences. We are going to have our own mystical and wonderful and transformational experiences, and they will change us. If we fully embrace them, we'll step out of the waters of life as a new person. As instruments of the divine, for me, the dolphins helped change my life, and I became more aware of the love that is around us everywhere. To this day, I can be in the presence of someone who's having a very upsetting day and realized, oh, they've just turned down the volume on love. And I want to be a vehicle of love and stand there in love. Someone who's having a challenging time, that's the best that we can do. As we carry love into the world, we can help change everything. We can be a spiritually transformative experience as we move through the world. Now, I have an experience I told my husband I was going to try and remember to put in here, because one time we were working on a project. We're producers and writers, and we were working on a project that was huge with a very tight deadline. And it became late at night, and we realized that all the nice restaurants around us were closed. We didn't have any food, and we had to go to a McDonald's. This was definitely not our first choice of a restaurant. And as we went in, we were both arguing and grumping about it. And I'm saying, well, where else can we go? And Alden's saying, we could go to a grocery store. And by the time we go to a grocery store, we're already starving. So we're arguing like this. We go in the McDonald's and everything looks peaceful, except at that moment, a man walks out with a tray. A woman just has taken a drink from the Coke machine. She tilts it ever so slightly. It spills to the floor. He's got a big tray. He steps in the spill. His tray goes up in the air. He knocks her over, himself over. The tray flies everywhere. And Alden looks at me and he said, "We're doing that, aren't we?" And I said, "Oh my gosh, I think we are." And I said, "We better just calm ourselves down right now." And we did. We didn't leave. We tried to be vehicles of peace and calm and love, but it works both ways. It depends on what we carry in the world. It's that principle of love. It's a continuum all the way from love to not love, but it's all love. And we just have to turn up the volume. And that's what we did. We made it out of there. We laughed and apologized and helped everybody laugh and did our best. But from this dolphin experience, I had learned about the interconnectedness of all life. That was my big question. That was my existential question, is, are we all interconnected? Are we all vehicles of love come together, working with the divine? And now I had this experience of becoming far more intuitive, and the world seemed brighter and life was more positive. And it had a great deal more meaning than it did before. These are hallmark effects of a spiritually transformative experience. And another aspect was that it seemed as if the fabric of reality had been pulled back. And I could see clearly now. I could see truth where previously there was doubt, where there was fear, there was worry. Beyond what's been called the veil of illusion, that there is no separation between us and the divine, that we are constantly loved and constantly in contact with the divine, but it's up to us to be aware of it. So the fabric of reality had been pulled back, and I loved what I saw. The challenge becomes to walk into the world where there's chaos and recognize that we have that ability to be the calm presence, to be a vehicle of love, to do amazing things in the world. Like Robert Bear and Yvonne Kaysen co-founded Spiritual Awakenings International. She was a medical doctor. You can see that that shift is huge. He used to be a policeman. You know, how does this happen? What is that evolution about? And it is exactly that. It's choice after choice of turning to the light, opening the door of love and listening for the guidance so that you can be a vehicle for others, so that you can open up more to who you really are and what you have to offer the world. Another aspect of love is service. So thank you, Yvonne, and thank you, Robert, for the amazing service that Spiritual Awakenings International is for seekers and people of experiences who want to understand their greater spiritual nature. So after that day, I discovered I had remarkable abilities beyond anything that I had ever experienced. And my daily spiritual practices have helped me to expand that awareness and also to keep balance. Just before I left on the trip to the beach where the dolphin rescue occurred, I had learned about an ancient chant. We've talked about several different chants today, but this one is an ancient name for God. It's been known on this planet for thousands of years. I sing it on a daily basis or chant it briefly, sometimes for 20 minutes, if there isn't time, even for a few minutes. But the constant for me is always do it while I focus on something I love. Because if we're going to enhance our vibration, we want to be focused and clear that what we're enhancing is love, because that is who we are. So it's in accord with our nature. It is what God is. It is what the mystical and spiritual is. It's all a continuum of love. I do that for 20 minutes a day when I have time, sometimes longer if I'm facing a crisis, and it allows me to live a very joyous and balanced spiritual life. There is somewhere you can go to find out more. HughAncientChant.com is a very clear and easy way to learn more about that chant if you want to learn how to do it. Since that day, I remain filled with gratitude for God's love, for the guidance, for the protection that are always with us. And I know it doesn't always feel that way. We may think that we have ebbs and flows of being connected to the divine, but we are actually always connected to the divine. It's simply up to us to see it and ask for the help that is always freely given. So every day I marvel that the divine can pull together, as I said, all the forces of the universe in a split second to change the course of events in our lives. And I think it's really, really important, that's why I repeat it, that we remember that nothing is set in stone, that we can always open the door to this greater spiritual experience. And I know that there is a divine power in the universe working for our greatest good if we will just ask for help with an open heart. Again, an important message that I want to bring to you. I share it here over Hilton Head Island because it represents love to me. And here you see me, my husband and I lived there for a while until we realized, oh, we haven't died and gone to heaven and we have to come back into the world. So now we live in California where all our kids are instead of on a remote island off the coast of South Carolina. But I consider Hilton Head our family home, no matter how far away we are. And to me, it's a magical, mystical island famous for its year-round population of dolphins who do not migrate. Who ever heard of such a thing? It's one of the few places in the world that the dolphins don't leave. Well, who would want to leave? And so I consider the waters blessed. And dolphins live 15, 20 years in the wild. So every year when I went back to Hilton Head, I would go and find the dolphins because I felt like these are my dolphins. These dolphins know me. We have met. And so I've had many cool experiences with the dolphins. But to acknowledge the dolphins for keeping me alive, my husband renamed our production company Dolphin Media Services. That's how that happened. And used to be Alden Butcher Productions. So he gave up his namesake to to acknowledge the dolphins. And then we went swimming with the dolphins to acknowledge the 20th anniversary of my rescue. And when he took us swimming, my daughter and I, swimming with the dolphins, we went down to Florida to where there's a research institute. And so it's a very controlled, beautiful experience. But having had the experience that I had, I have to admit that it was too controlled for me. I wanted to just throw myself in with the dolphins and play, and we weren't allowed to do that. And there were rules. You do this, you do this, you don't do this, you don't do that. And then you finally get to be with the dolphins, and it's got a period of time, and what you do is watched over carefully by someone. So although I was very grateful to my husband for bringing me there, and I loved being with the dolphins, I felt disappointed. And so as my dolphin was leaving, I'm the last one out of the water. My husband and my daughter are going back to get changed. The person who's in charge of the dolphins, the trainer, has left to go get the next group who are waiting to come. And I watched my dolphin leave. And I said inwardly to my dolphin, I love you and I thank you. And I was glad to meet you, but I'm sorry. I know you feel what's in my heart. I'm disappointed. And I said, the truth be known, I wanted intimacy. I wanted a kiss. I love telling you this because the dolphin was leaving through the lock, but just before the lock, he makes a sharp turn and he rises in the air. And I thought, oh, he's acknowledging me. Oh, good. That was wonderful. He dives back down and he starts swimming back toward me. Now, one of those rules that we were told is do not touch the face of the dolphin because it has some powerful ability to break your jaw if you're not careful. And they use it to batter sharks, their faces, because they're so powerful and these bones are so thick. And here comes my dolphin straight toward my face, and slowly, ever so gently, he holds his mouth to my mouth and he kisses me and I kiss him back. And I am kissing with the dolphin and just freaking out with joy that this could possibly happen. And you hear all the way down at the end of the pier, you hear this woman yelling, no! And the trainer is having just a conniption. And my husband turns around because he knows if there's trouble, it's probably me. But we get to witness the kiss. And then my dolphin does this twirling, beautiful dance. And I run toward my husband so I'm not accosted by the trainer. And off I go with my kiss. And so, you know, I'm in love with the dolphins. I have written a new book with my husband, Alden Butcher. It's called 5 Blue Rings. It's a completely different journey that you can find out about at 5bluerings.com. It is not published yet. We had an offer from Paramount Pictures. They wanted to make it into a bestseller and they wanted to make it into a movie. And unbelievably, we turned down the offer because their only caveat was that we had to swear that the story wasn't true, and we had to sign legal documents saying that it was fiction, and neither of us could do it. Despite the money, the opportunity, we couldn't do it. And so finally we have it written and we're looking again now for our publisher. And as I told you, Dolphin Media Group, we do marketing, but one of the things we do is we help authors write, edit, publish, and market their books, and that's a lot of fun. And I want to give a big thank you to Spiritual Awakenings International for their fabulous programs. Let's be sure to support them. The patron sponsors all gave very generously. Our sponsors overall have been very helpful in spreading the word about SAI. It's amazing. It's in over 80 countries in only 3 years. Oh my gosh, I just delight at that. I'm so grateful to serve on the board of SAI, of Spiritual Awakenings International, and even a small donation helps. So saidonate.org. It's a way to be of service, which is one aspect of love. So thanks so much, everyone, and may the blessings be. And I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you, Anne. That's wonderful. If you can, oh, great. You stopped screen sharing there. Oh, come on. What an incredibly inspirational story. Thank you, Anne. It was just phenomenal. You were a spark of light, of dolphin light in our wonderful conference here. There have been many comments in the chat about how inspirational your dolphin story is. And we've had a few questions on a similar theme that I want to ask you as your first question here is about the consciousness of dolphins. Do you feel, based on your experience, that dolphins are on a higher plane of consciousness?
You know, it's an interesting question because I've researched a lot and it's not really out there very deeply, but I firmly believe it. Of course, I believe it. Are you kidding me? What the heck was that? What was that ceremony? What happened there? Of course, I believe it. I believe they knew exactly what they were doing, that I felt that they were preparing me for my next step in my life's work. I believe that they were healing things within me that I needed to get rid of. I mean, what kind of consciousness is that they can see it and do that? And so it's a great question. I really appreciate it. And I believe absolutely 100% yes. I believe they are of a higher consciousness, that we don't give them nearly the credit that they are due and that we don't understand. And it's because we're not quite at their level yet, but that's what I believe.
Awesome. We have, oops, sorry, somehow you disappeared. There you go. So we have another question. Somebody mentions Dr. John Lilly's work that does seem to indicate dolphins have a very high consciousness. And this is from Tim, and he asks you also, did you feel that they were actually communicating with you in some manner? And if so, what did they communicate to you?
Gosh, I love these questions. Thank you. I could cry. Yes, I absolutely felt that the dolphins were communicating with me. I mean, to look me right in the eye and make these sounds, these ee and clicking sounds, and then touch me. And they let me know that I wasn't to leave, that I'm standing in chest deep water, the waves are coming up, but they made such a tight circle. This is where I needed to stand. This is what was happening. This is a ceremony. You need to hold still and let us do our thing. And so, of course, I felt they were communicating. Now, the second part is, what were they communicating? And I did answer that from the best of my ability. I felt that they were communicating that, one, they were healing me. And I knew it. And I shouted it out to them. I know what you're doing. You're changing me. You're helping me. You're healing me. You know, I had trauma as a child. My father died when I was very young, and I adored him. And it was very, very traumatic for me. My mother said I cried until blood was coming out of my tear ducts. And so that sorrow was deep in there. Even as a high school teacher, a student could come in the room and say, my dad said such and such, and a tear would slip out of my eye just at the mention of the word. And after that day with the dolphins, I felt like I was healed. I was transformed. The other part was the love. I felt that they were making a love adjustment in me, that they were taking me up a whole bunch of notches into a love that I didn't even know could exist. Not a love like I love somebody because we share a relationship, but something much greater than that. It's a love in service, I believe, is the best way to describe it. Because were they being of service? Absolutely. But I felt from that day that I had learned that God is the greatest servant of all, serving all of us. And so to be more godlike, we must learn to be of service. We must look for whatever we can open our hearts and be of service. And so part of what was going on there to me was about service. And already I might have been inclined that way. Of course, I'm a high school teacher. Of course, I'm trying to be of service. But as I say, the volume got turned up tremendously. I hope that answers the question. And thank you. It was a beautiful question.
Thank you, Anne. We have another interesting comment here from Ellen Drummond Curtis, and I'd love to hear your response to this. Ellen points out that dolphins are considered one of the animal spirit guides that represent celestial origins, like the Pleiadian Council. And this makes me connect to 5 blue rings, which Ellen doesn't know about. So do you want to make any comment on that, Anne?
Okay, I'm all over that. I absolutely agree. And you know, I had an experience. I went to see Dr. Michael Newton. Dr. Michael Newton wrote books about the life between lives. And when I heard about him, he was already retired. But because of this experience that I had had with the dolphins, plus other experiences, near-death experiences and out-of-body experiences after that, I really wanted to see him. I wanted a better sense of who I am and why I'm here, and why, because this is not the only kind of magical, mystical thing that occurred to me. In fact, the 5 blue rings, you know, makes dolphin story look like child's play. And so I wrote him and said, no, I really do need to see you, even though you're retired. And he sent me a list of people that I could see instead. And I wrote him again and said, no, I really need to see you. And I shared a few things. And this went on for months. Me write him write back. I was really grateful he at least responded. And that meant to me, if I keep it up, he might relent. And finally, the phone rings one day and he goes, all right, I'll do it. And I got to go see him. So I flew out to California to see him. I had a day with him. And one of the things he did was he took me back into my life between lives, is what he meant to be doing, but he took me into a lifetime. And in that lifetime, I was a water being, and it blew me away. But so here I am, I'm in hypnosis, deep in hypnosis. He takes me in, I'm a water being, and I'm like, oh, thank God, is what you hear me saying on the recording. Oh, thank God, here I am. And then I open my eyes and I say to him, you may leave now. And he said, Anne, I can't do that. And I said, please leave the room. And he said, I can only go for 5 or 10 minutes. I can't leave you like this. And I'm like, please leave the room. And so he leaves the room. And I bask in this bliss of being a water being. I do not have all the answers, Yvonne, about what that means and the Pleiadian beings or all of that. I have absolutely no idea, but I loved every second of it. And when he came back in the room and he brought me out of it, unfortunately, from my perspective at the time, he said, I'm sorry, I have to do this, but he did it. But what I had experienced was interactions with dolphins and all of these water creatures, let's say. And it was, I've never told this before, but it was just beyond magnificent. And then sort of like the day with the dolphins, where I wanted to get in bed and pull the covers over my head. When I got in the car with my husband after this was all over, he goes, well, tell me all about it. And I said, please don't talk. And it went on for the entire day. And he realized I was trying to hold on to the experience and immerse myself in it. And eventually we were able to talk again. So he's a very patient kind of guy. But yes, Yvonne, when you look at 5bluerings.com, you'll understand a whole lot more. The dolphin story is the beginning of 5 blue rings. It's the prelude in 5 blue rings. The preface, I mean.
All right. Oh, something happened here. Let's try and get us back in the spotlight. Don't know what happened here. All right. Something weird happened. All right. We have another question about the dolphin experience, which is just phenomenal. Actually, 2 questions. Robert wants to know, do you know how many dolphins were actually involved in your dolphin rescue? It seems like it was a pod of dolphins.
It was, but pods do vary in sizes. There can be very large pods. It was not a very large pod. It was probably only 9 to 12 dolphins, not, you know, it can be 25 or something. But it was enough dolphins that I couldn't keep track of them all, you know, when they were circling me. But that's how I estimated in my head, 9 or 12 dolphins. It was a pod of dolphins. And that I went out on Hilton Head looking for, where's a group of dolphins? I'm looking for my 9 or 12. Where are these guys? And some were younger than others. You could tell because they were smaller than others. That's why I included some small dolphins in my pictures too.
Mhm.
And what
Awesome.
was the other question?
Yeah, I haven't asked you the other one yet. Okay, Tim wants to know, did the dolphin experience help you resolve the spiritual crisis and spiritual questions you were having? He says, I think it did, but he wanted to know, did it resolve it for you?
That's a great question too, because I had that divorce slide up there. Boy, I understood because it was rough. I mean, I'm such a committed and faithful person that I never imagined that I would be divorced. And yet that divorce was actually about the evolution in consciousness that was about to occur for me. We were already at odds with where we were in terms of being balanced energetically. And now, there was no question. And yes, the resolution was immediate. I mean, it was very interesting because he was Catholic. And when I came back, I had to meet with the priest, and I met with the priest. And the priest not only said, I don't think you have anything to be concerned about because I'm going to annul the marriage. It was like, what? And he said, I'm annulling the marriage. He said, this marriage does not exist. You're free to move on. And I went ahead and filed the papers for divorce, but I thought that was beautiful from a spiritual perspective. It was good.
Mhm. Awesome. Awesome. Maria is asking you a very interesting question. She'd like to know, why does not everyone in the world have spiritually transformative experiences? If that were the case, the world would have more love, no hate, etc. What are your thoughts on that, Anne?
Such good questions. Remember, the name of this conference is The Dawn of Expanding Consciousness. This is expanded consciousness we're living in. It is happening. People are having those experiences. Now, souls are of different ages and different awareness, and they've come here for different things. But even remembering our dreams can begin the process of evolution. Anything that, even two people coming together in romantic love, can open the heart and allow us to grow spiritually. Everything that's happening around us is a chance to choose love. And so are those choices spiritually transformative experiences from my perspective? Yes, they are. And some are more subtle. Some on the Richter scale barely register at all. Others are going to be off the top. But I believe, as I told my students, after a while, my classroom became a mecca. People were begging to be in the classroom. It's an English classroom. Who wants to English? They were begging to be in my classroom. So now we had kids sitting in the windowsill seats. We put little cushions there so we could go from 35 to 45 to 50 students in the classroom to try and get them in there. And they were told, you can't change from the English class you already have. And they're like, that's okay, I want to. I'll give up study hall. Just let me in the classroom. That's because soul was begging for the experience of being quickened. They wanted to be connected with spirit. And I came back so connected with spirit that I almost was illuminated like a light bulb, and they knew it. And that's what happened. It just took off like crazy.
Awesome. We have time for a couple more questions. Dana would like to know, have other people shared amazing dolphin stories with you?
Yes, because I said I've traveled all over the world, and mostly, of course, I love that young man telling me about what happened to his mother, because that also was a beautiful experience of recognizing there is no death, that we're all soul. And no matter what happens, that everything is happening perfectly, whether we're aware of it or not. But I heard from men who were in the Navy, and they had all kinds of cool stories. Some were their stories, some were stories that they had witnessed. And that was really cool for me. These very balanced, very, physical guys, and they were transformed by it. They were, even if it was someone else's experience, they were uplifted by it. And it caused them to consider how and why that had occurred. And it was very beautiful.
Awesome. Our last question, again, this is a very thought-provoking one, is from Stephen, who's asking you, well, with all your experiences, do you believe in past lives?
Oh, my goodness. Yes, you certainly don't know me, do you? Um, Look at fivebluerings.com and you will have your answer. I definitely believe in past lives. I've had past life recall. I've experienced the past life of other people even, and I'll respect their privacy and not tell any of those stories here, but absolutely, I believe in past lives, and I believe this is our evolutionary spiritual process that we choose to come here, of our own volition, that in this life between lives, that we discuss what we want and we make decisions and we come here for our own purposes. And if we remember that, it's very empowering. And then eventually, I believe we evolve out of this plane and go back into the inner worlds. And some people will choose to come back again, or they will need to come back again. And others will move on in the strata of the various spiritual planes in service and love, depending on what they have gained along the way.
Awesome. Thank you, Anne. That was an absolutely inspiring and beautiful presentation. So thank you so much. It's an honor to have you on our Spiritual Awakenings International board. And that presentation was truly, truly inspirational. Thank you.